Welcome back, class 10. Continuing with your history class. Today, continuing with your Second World War. Today, I will just go through the consequences of the war. Events I will not discuss as it is not in your 2021 exam. Consequences I will just discuss because you should know what was the consequence, because it will be an introduction before going into the next chapter, which is the United Nations. What was the consequences? The consequences of the war were as follows: death and devastation on an unprecedented scale. Unprecedented means not measurable, unexpectedly high. It was the most devastating war in human history. Millions of people were killed. Vast areas of Europe and Asia were left in ruins. The war created conditions of acute scarcity of foodstuff, essential goods, and shelter. So, obviously, it was the most devastating war in the human history. Millions of people were killed. Vast portions of Europe and Asia were left into ruins. The war created conditions of acute scarcity, that means demand, of foodstuffs, essential goods, and shelter. Number two, defeat of Axis power. The war resulted in the overthrow of the fascist and Nazi dictatorships. German, Italian, and Japanese dictatorial regimes surrendered to the Allies. The Allies occupied Germany and it was partitioned into 4 zones. To bring to trial the most serious offenders, an international military tribunal, the tribunal means court, was set up in Nuremberg in Germany. So the war resulted in the overthrow of fascist and Nazi dictatorship. German, Italian, and Japanese dictatorial regimes surrendered to the Allies. The Allies occupied Germany and it was partitioned into 4 zones. Now, to bring to trial, that means to give justice, or to punish rather, the most serious offenders, to punish the most serious offenders, an international military tribunal, international military court, was set up in Nuremberg in Germany. The trial began in November 1945 and ended in September 1946. Those on trial were charged with a variety of offenses, such as violation of the law of war, crimes against humanity. 22 of them were held guilty, of whom 11 were sentenced to death. Now comes rise of communism. Russia under Stalin was successful in establishing communist government in East European countries like Poland, Hungary, Bulgaria, Romania, Albania, and Czechoslovakia. Now the Cold War. The United States and Russia, that means America and Russia, emerged, that means came forward as great powers in the world. The entire world seemed to be divided into 2 power blocks. This led to the emergence of Cold War between the Western powers led by the USA and the communist bloc led by Russia. The term Cold War was first used by Bernard Baruch, an American statesman, in a speech on 16th April 1947. He said, "Let us not be deceived. We are today in the midst of a Cold War." What is Cold War? Cold War is a state of extreme political unfriendliness between 2 countries, although they do not actually fight with each other. In English, there's a term meaning giving a cold shoulder. Giving a cold shoulder means if you ignore a person. You don't fight with that person, you just ignore him, giving a cold shoulder. Cold War means two countries, they are total enemies, but they are not fighting against each other, but there is an extreme political unfriendliness. In fact, the Cold War was neither a condition of war nor a condition of peace. It was a state of uneasy peace. Peace cannot be uneasy, but it is a state of uneasy peace. Its consequences. Cold War set in motion a mad race of armaments. It also led to the formation of various military alliances. Alliances means friendship, such as NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, SEATO, Southeast Asia Treaty Organization, under US leadership, and the Warsaw Pact, signed by the representatives of Russia and other communist countries. The Cold War led to one crisis after another, such as Britain blockade, crisis over missiles in Cuba, and military interventions in Czechoslovakia. In such a situation, many countries, including India, adopted a policy of keeping out of military alliances and working for the development of the countries and peace of the world. This came to be known as the policy of non-alignment. Allying means getting associated with somebody. Non-aligned means I will not get associated with any power bloc. I will keep myself independent and I will work for the development of my country, for the people and for their development. So I will not get aligned. I will not cling to any superpower. India is one of the non-aligned country. They are not aligned to any superpower. End of the Cold War. The two superpowers preferred peaceful coexistence, staying together, to a nuclear war. The non-aligned movement, NAM, also made a valuable contribution to reducing the intensity of Cold War. The Russian President Mikhail Gorbachev introduced many reforms in Russia. His policies of political liberalizations, went a long way in relieving the world of the tensions of the Cold War. The Warsaw Pact was dissolved in July 1991. In December 1991, he announced the designation of Soviet Union. With this, the Cold War came to an end. Now, what we'll learn in the next chapter is United Nations. Formation of United Nations. Men looked for a better and happier world after the war. This led to the establishment of the United Nations organizations on 24th October 1945. The United Nations is being described as hope and conscience of the world. The UN Charter lays down peace, security, and faith in human dignity as the major principles of and objectives of the United Nations. A nuclear war, if it occurs, means the destruction of the human race. Therefore, a nuclear war must be stopped at all costs. The United Nations General Assembly decided to observe 1970s and 1980s as disarmament decade and second disarmament decade respectively. That means 1970s were disarmament decade, 10 years, and 1980s was the second disarmament decade. The Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty, CTBT, provides that non-nuclear states should not manufacture nuclear weapons, but India rejected it. But it did not lay down a time-bound framework to eliminate all nuclear weapons from the earth. So, this is the consequences of the war. So, it is very important to know the consequences because we learned about the war and what is the result of the war. That is also very necessary. So, with this, we come to the end of the Second World War. And in the next class, we'll start with the United Nations organizations. Okay, so until then, study well. Thank you.